Welcome to the UK Travel Planning Podcast. Your host is the founder of the UK Travel Planning website, Tracy Collins. In this podcast, Tracy shares destination guides, travel tips, and itinerary ideas, as well as interviews with a variety of guests who share their knowledge and experience of UK travel to help you plan your perfect UK vacation. Join us as we explore the UK from cosmopolitan cities to quaint villages, from historic castles to beautiful islands, and from the picturesque countryside to seaside towns.
Hi, and welcome to episode 30 of the UK Travel Planner podcast. This week I'm joined by Doug, who's also come to talk about a very exciting road trip that we took in 2022.
Yes, it was absolutely marvellous.
We had a fantastic time. So, as road trips go, one destination you can be sure of as an epic road trip is Scotland. In this episode of the podcast, we're going to talk through our Scotland road trip itinerary, which included our favourite destinations across the country. So we did this road trip in 2022, in May 2022, and we did it over 18 days. So for those of you who are interested in planning your trip to Scotland this year by road, there is actually a copy of this itinerary on the website, and I will put a link to that in the show notes. So basically, you can use the itinerary as off the peg. It's 18 days, but you can adapt it for 10 or 14 days. So in this episode, we're going to talk through our itinerary and also just kind of share some of the things that we really enjoyed and we recommend that you do, but also some of the things that we learned from this trip. So I think, should we give a quick brief outline of the itinerary?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay, so as I say, it was 18 days. So we started off in Edinburgh. We got the train up to Edinburgh, so we actually picked up the car in Edinburgh. So we went on then to Callander, over to Oban, and then over to the islands, so islands of Staffa, Mull, and Iona. I did that trip. Doug didn't. He took a road trip on that day. We then went up to Fort William, over to the Isle of Skye. Then we joined the North Coast 500 at Ullapool. Went on to Durness, Tongue, Scale, again on the North Coast 500, over to the Orkney Islands, which was actually a late addition to our itinerary, back over from Orkney to John O'Groats, down to Inverness, and then back down to Edinburgh. So it was a pretty epic road trip, actually.
It was, yes, but we planned to the nth degree before we started, really. But no matter how much we planned it, we still changed things on the day.
Absolutely,
absolutely adaptable, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there were still things that we kind of thought afterwards we would have changed. So obviously I've reflected that in the itinerary on the website. But yeah, so we thought, because we know there's a lot of questions in our Facebook group at the moment, there's a lot of people considering planning a road trip around Scotland, and I know people kind of bit like don't know where to start. Also, we'll just say, for those of you who prefer to travel by public transport, we've actually also just published a Best of Scotland by rail itinerary, so you can catch a train basically in a loop round. The only part you can't do is Skye. You have to catch a bus and then maybe hire a car on Skye, or take a tour or public transport, and then get yourself back to the Cala Coch to catch the train. But it's all in that article which Doug wrote. We just published in the last few days. So let's talk about the first. So we decided to stop in Edinburgh for the first few days. Now, we've been there multiple times before, and I will actually do a podcast very soon about things to do and see in Edinburgh, because I know it's a very popular destination. But we still spent 3 nights there, didn't we?
We did, and we stayed in the same place we've stayed in numerous times before. I managed to walk up Arthur's Seat, which was fantastic, which I keep mentioning. Yes,
that's something that you really want to do. So if you haven't been to Edinburgh before, we'd recommend really that you spend at least 2 to 3 days there, just to get really a taste of the city. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Edinburgh, because we have got extensive resources about Edinburgh on the website, and I will come back and talk in another podcast actually about tips for anybody planning a trip to Edinburgh for the first time. So basically, after the 3 days in Edinburgh, we did pick up a hire car. So we hired a car from Edinburgh and picked it up. So now one thing that we did do, which I would advise as well, is first of all, we had an SUV because we were going to be driving the North Coast 500, so quite steep inclines. We did Applecross, for example, which is pretty notorious, a notorious drive. So and we also had a second driver. So Doug and I both shared the driving, which I think is important.
It is very important, and we sort of worked an hour and a half sort of drive each.
Yeah.
Sometimes we chose the route. Times, I'll be honest, I get a little bit travel sick. So we chose a route where if it was a bit more windy, twisty, I drove that part, didn't I?
That's right. Yeah, you did. Like Applecross, you drove while I silently screamed.
Yeah, that's for a different reason. That was
it was scary.
Yeah,
it was a bit scary. So from there, we decided to go. We drove via Falkirk to see the Kelpies and the Falkirk Wheel.
Yes.
And also via Stirling to see the castle. So that was a 1-day trip that we did basically to get ourselves to Callander. So that was our destination. Now, I hadn't been to Callander before, but it was somewhere that you'd been to.
Yes, I've got some family not too far from there. So it's a very good central location. It's a tiny little town, village, I think it's more of a town. Yeah, and it worked out really well. It was just enough. We didn't want to overstress ourselves at that first day. Being summer, it was light into the evening, but we wanted to get to the accommodation, didn't we? And
yeah.
A good time.
So the thing is, for that day, that was an hour's drive. So if you're planning to go from Edinburgh to Callander, that'll only take you an hour. But obviously, because we recommend that you stop off at the Kelpies. So if you're not sure what the Kelpies are, they are the massive horse head sculptures. They're 30 metres high. There are 2 of them. They're fabulous to see. Also, the Falkirk Wheel, which is something, it's basically how they move boats up onto the Caledonian Canal.
Between 2 canals.
Yeah, and it's incredible to watch that. And obviously, Stirling Castle is worth stopping off for. So that's still going to be a full day, even though it's only an hour to get to Callander.
I mean, there's other things to see. Is the Bannockburn Monument as well for the battle.
A National Wallace Monument as well. So there's quite a few things you can add into that day trip. So basically but it's a nice ease yourself into the drive to get yourself basically up to Callander. So the next day we went from Callander and we did basically a loop drive to Killin, then on to Kenmore, Aberfeldy, Pitlochry, and then back to Callander via Cymru Creef on the A9 and A822. So now all the information about these distances and drives will be in the show notes. And we have got, as I say, the itinerary out for you. So the highlights of that day, I mean, the Falls of Docket
in Killin
were absolutely fabulous. There've been quite a lot of rain, so they really, really were full and really, really lovely. So I've got some pictures of that. I will share those as well. Yep. And also with that drive as well over Kenmore.
Ben Lawes,
that's right.
Which is about the second or third highest peak in Scotland.
Yeah, so that was pretty epic as well. So if you really want views, and we were very lucky actually because the weather was beautiful that day. So if you want good views, that is a really good drive to take. And then stop off in Pitlochry and visit the Fish Ladder, which is very famous for. Pitlochry is also a very pretty little Scottish town. So that's worth popping into. So that's actually a whole day trip. Also, a good little tip here, because I know we often get asked about Highland cows, is that you can see, or you could, hopefully they're still there, is you can see Highland cows in a field on the right-hand side of the road as you drive north out of Callander. Fingers crossed that they're still there, but there were a couple of Highland cows in that field. I think it's pretty well known.
Because some of the tours stopping off there as well.
Yeah, we did see a few tours there. Yeah. So that's the next day. So Callander, really pretty place to visit.
Yeah, and there's a supermarket there. Yeah. It's one of the larger places in that area. So it gives you a good chance to stock up.
And, pubs as well. There's some nice pubs. And I remember we got fish and chips. So the next day, we drove to Oban. So on that day, we went via the Trossach National Park, Loch Lomond and Loch Katrine. So that was that drive that day. We drove basically from Callander to, I can never pronounce it, Bala, on Loch Lomond, which was a 45-kilometre drive before then driving to Oban on the A82, which was a 74-mile drive. And we went via Itinerary Castle, which again is very famous Scottish castle. If you saw a photo of it, you'd recognise it. That was a lovely day. The weather had turned, though. Remember, this was May, so the views on Loch Lomond weren't brilliant. It was quite low cloud. But it was
a bit chilly.
It was a bit chilly. Yeah, it was a bit cold. And also when we got to Inverary Castle, it was heavy rain. So we drove in, had a little look, and then left. But you do have enough time that day. Again, one of the things I think we've learned is that you just have to be adaptive to the weather. You can't. It's the UK. You can't necessarily predict the weather. We didn't have the best weather.
Yeah, and really. One we found is not to get too downhearted and despondent because you make all these plans.
Exactly.
And the weather sort of intervenes.
Yeah.
So we just took it on a stride and, oh, well, move on.
Yeah. We stayed in Oban for a couple of nights. The reason we went to Oban was that I really wanted to go over to Mull, Iona and Staffa and see Fingal's Cave. So I took a 10-hour, I think it was a 10-hour boat trip that next day from Oban. Doug, because you get a bit seasick, you didn't do that.
Bit as in very seasick.
Yeah.
I took the A828 coastal road, and it comes out of Oban, and you follow the coast all the way up to Ballachulish and Glencoe. But on the way, you've got the Dunstervage Castle, Castle Stork, and the views are just stunning. And a bit old-fashioned, I took a packed lunch with me, and I sat looking at the views across, and it was really, really nice. A beautiful day.
Yeah, and I know you had I really enjoyed as well going over to Mull and Iona and stuff. Again, we had the weather was changeable. One thing I would say to you, if you are planning to do that boat trip, and I would highly recommend it, is just really think carefully about what you're wearing. Make sure that you're kind of prepared for all events weather-wise, and that you wear really good shoes with good grip, and also probably walking boots would be a good idea, because it's quite, when we went over onto the island of Staffa, it is quite muddy, and I know I'd seen pictures of people who'd been there previous weeks before we went over, and it was very windy and wet, and actually I kind of ruined my shoes going over there. So yeah, really think carefully about what your footwear is going to be, especially if it's been wet. But that was a fantastic day. So it was absolutely, Oban's a really interesting place to visit. It's supposed to be is it the seafood? I don't eat seafood.
Yeah, it's the seafood capital of Scotland.
Yeah. I don't eat seafood, so it doesn't affect me, but I know plenty of people who do.
Plenty of restaurants, cafes serving fish.
Yeah. So the only thing I guess about Oban is that parking's not great. So if we stayed in a bed and breakfast, but there's a lot of one-way little streets and windy roads.
Yes.
So it just make sure that you get accommodation with parking. That I'd highly recommend. And then we actually walked down to the ferry the next morning.
It was probably quicker.
Yeah, it would have been
one-way streets.
Yeah.
And those steps straight down.
Yeah, so you really have to consider that for Oban. So the next day we drove to Fort William, and we didn't go on the same route that Doug had taken the day before. We went via the A82, which takes you via Rannochmoor and Glencoe that way, it's one of I've talked about it numerous times, but Glencoe is probably one of my just favourite places in the entire world. There's something about that place that is amazing. So there's lots of viewpoints to stop off along the way. You've got the Rannochmoor viewpoint at the Bridge of Orkney.
That's right, yeah. Stunning views across the Rannochmoor, which is a peat bog.
Yeah, and if you catch a Caledonian Sleeper as well, you get great views as you cross over Rannochmoor from the train. And as you're coming into Fort William, look out for Ben Nevis, which is the highest mountain in the UK, and you can't really miss it, to be honest. No. So we stayed in Inverness for a couple of nights. Not Inverness, we stayed in Fort William for a couple of nights, which I'd highly recommend. We were catching the Jacobite train, the Harry Potter train, which is famous from the movies. It crosses over the Glenfinnan Viaduct. It gets booked up incredibly quickly. So if you're planning to do the Harry Potter train this year, you might already have missed out. And if you have, you're probably going to have to book a tour from Edinburgh or Glasgow to get yourself on the Harry Potter train, because it is so incredibly popular. There's lots of things to do in Fort William as well, though.
And surrounding areas, beautiful walks as well.
So you've got Neptune's Staircase, you've got Glenfinnan Church, the monument. So one tip I would say as well, if you're catching the Harry Potter train, we did record it in the morning, is when you get back in the afternoon, jump in your car and get yourself back to the viaduct, and you can actually see the afternoon train as it comes back over the viaduct. You'll see a lot of people there, a lot of photographers there. Yeah,
that's right. Stunning views from wherever you stand.
Yeah, so it's great. So you get to travel in the train in the morning, and you get to see it across the viaduct in the afternoon. So you get both. Highly recommend, if you can swing it, to go first class. It was a fabulous experience. You stop off for a few hours in Mallaig on the way, and again, there's a lovely little Harry Potter shop that's worth popping into. I would recommend, when you get into Mallaig off the train, that you go and get something to eat straight away, because everybody that gets off the train is going to go to eat. So make sure you go and get yourself some lunch straight away. So after staying in Fort William for a few days, we then drove over to Skye. So you have to go to Mallaig to catch the ferry.
You catch the ferry across from Mallaig. It takes about 20 minutes, I think. It's very quick, and it takes you to Armadale.
Yeah, so if you're driving from Armadale to Portree, it takes you about an hour, but there's so much to see along the way that really it's just an absolute, Isle of Skye is fabulous, absolutely fantastic. A few tips for the Isle of Skye, because we have got an itinerary for the Isle of Skye and lots of information about Skye on the website. We know it's one of the most popular destinations for tourists to go to Skye. We were there in May. We had 3 days, 1 day of fabulous weather and 2 days of, let's say, not fabulous weather.
Not great weather.
So again, you need to be prepared for that might happen. And if you know that's going to be the case, try and squeeze as much as you can the day that the weather's really good. There's lots to see on Skye. Highlights for us, I really enjoyed going in Dunvegan Castle and gardens. They were beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing I will say. People associate Skye with just people who want to go walking. We don't do a huge amount of walking, and just appreciate the scenery. I do a little bit, but not. I won't call it myself a serious hiker.
No, but I think that it's worth actually saying, because it did, because I don't particularly like hiking. I don't make a secret of that. But we went to the fairy pools, and it's a bit of a hike to get to them. I was actually quite surprised.
And a bit of a shock. Steep as well.
Yeah, steep. You've got to kind of go down a steep hill, and then obviously you've got to climb back up on that again. And it is quite a walk to get to them. They were actually finishing off a few bridges, which will make things a bit easier, because when we were there in 2022, you actually had to cross over the river by stepping stones, which is fine, but it's going to be so much better now that these bridges have gone in.
Make sure you take some water, because there's nowhere to buy drinks there, was there?
No, not at all. And you've got to get parked. There's a car park, which is quite far, and you've got to so you need to take some money for parking. And prepare for a hike to get to the fairy pools. Definitely worth it, but they're not just right next to the car park, let's say that much. Other places you went to the Fairy Glen. I kind of gave up that day because the heavens opened and we had like a massive little squally storm.
Yes.
So I went back to the car.
Yes, it was almost biblical storms. It was quite hair raising, but to be honest, it just added to the moment.
Yeah. So after Skye, we headed over to join the North Coast 500. So we crossed over. We went to first of all crossed over the Skye Bridge, the Cala la Colch, and then we went to Allandone Castle for some pictures.
Yeah. That was more. Yeah, the views of the loch there and the castle are stunning. We probably enjoyed the views more than the actual venue itself.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was nice, and we spent a little bit of time there, probably enough time, and that was fine. And then we popped in at Manuela's Wee Bakery for a bite to eat, which is not too far from. It's kind of between Allandone Castle and Cala la Colch, and it's brilliant. It's a lovely little bakery, so if you get a chance, pop in there to pick up some snacks. And then we drove 3 hours up on the A890 and A832, 120 miles now on the famous North Coast 500 route up to Ullapool. Now, this is the day that we drove the Applecross.
Yeah, it was quite hair-raising. I'm a slow driver, so, and we're glad we did it, though. It was... Yeah, I wouldn't want to fancy doing it with a caravan behind or a motorhome.
No, I think one thing, if you're going to drive in Scotland, you need to be really aware of kind of that some of the roads are particularly narrow. Like there's just one, there's just one enough for one car. There's lots of passing places, so you pull over and you let the cars past you or kind of go, whichever way. If they're coming towards you, obviously pull over and let them pass. But if there's somebody going a little bit faster, then you can pull in and let them pass.
Yeah, I think you need a sort of a combination of patience and confidence.
Yeah, I'll just close my eyes. So and we were also there in May, so a lot of lambs and sheep around. So you have to be really careful, really pay attention, because, and also at one point we had a deer in the road as well. So, stags, deer, sheep, just a huge amount of livestock. So you really have to pay attention and be careful. So that famous, I can't pronounce it, Billac na Bar Road goes from Kishorn to Applecross. And that, if you put that into your itinerary, fair play to you. I mean, I wouldn't miss it out. You can't do that in winter because that road is shut, but really prepare yourself, maybe watch some videos about that route.
It is, and I think it took us longer than the actual route maps told us.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Because obviously it's not going to take into account the amount of times you have to stop for the cars to pass.
Yeah, that's true. And you have to go slow because obviously, like I say, all the livestock, you have to be really careful because there's labs. And also because the scenery is just stunning. So this western coast of Scotland is pretty awe-inspiring. It really is. It takes your breath away. At some points, I just thought I was an alternative universe. I actually wasn't in the UK. It really is. So do give yourselves time to enjoy that scenery. So don't be racing from here to here to here. And I think that was one of the things that we said, didn't we? We would add extra days in.
Yeah, we wanted to enjoy it because when you're driving along, unfortunately, there's going to be impatient people who are obviously against the clock and they just want to move around as quickly as they possibly can.
Yeah.
And again, it's all part of having the patience to be able to take it all in and enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we stayed in Ullapool for an evening. So we actually went to a really nice restaurant. I'm going to see if I can actually find the name of it, but it was lovely. Now I'll have to try and find it and put it into the show notes. But we did have some lovely scallops and with black pudding, which was really nice in this restaurant in Ullapool. So the next day, then we headed off to Durness and Tongue. So this was a beautiful, again, another very scenic part of the route. So took about 2 hours for the first part to Durness, and then about another hour or so to Tongue. So again, because we kind of looked at the distances and thought, fine, but actually it takes longer. Yeah. So give yourself plenty of time. And we stayed in fantastic accommodation. We stayed in a glamping pod.
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah, we didn't know what to expect for that, didn't we?
Fabulous. Yeah. I think it was one of the favourite places that we stayed. I know we talked about it in a previous episode. It was top 10 things that we did when we were in the UK, and staying in that was just amazing. Again, we're surrounded by herds of deer.
Yeah.
Which was fabulous. And what was really good is we had a Wi-Fi device that we used, so we could both hotspot off that. And that worked even up there, even in the far north of Scotland. So some good places to stop off. We stopped off at Smoo Cave. I didn't walk down to the caves to have a look, but you did.
I did a walk down and took some photos, and it was magical, actually. Yeah.
There's some lovely beaches as well along that part of the route. We did want to go on the Golden Eagle zip line, but unfortunately it was too windy. It was too windy. It was shut the day that we were there anyway, so we couldn't do that. But again, it's just wild scenery and beautiful kind of coastline. So
it changes scenery as well as you're driving around it. In some places look sort of mountainous, and then there's greenness, and
well, there's just all rocks everywhere. It really is something amazing. So what we did on the next day of our itinerary is we decided at the last minute, really, I think a couple of weeks before we went, because we'd spoken, I think it's episode 10, with our friend who'd actually done the North Coast 500. And they'd included a trip onto Orkney Islands. Now, it was somewhere that we both wanted to go to.
Yeah.
So we decided to see if we could do that. Now, it was pretty expensive for the ferry. I think it was about £150 return. But we decided, no, we really want to do it. And we are so glad that we did. It meant an early start the next morning because it was quite a drive. It was, I think it was about, I don't know how much, 60 miles or something. I can't remember exact mileage we had to do, but we had to leave fairly early in the morning.
And avoid the deer at that time.
Yes, and there was a lot of wildlife, a lot of herds of deer on the road, and a cow which wouldn't move.
That's right.
Middle of the road. So again, give yourself plenty of time. So we had to get to Gills Bay to catch the ferry.
On the way there, we stopped off at Dunnet Head, which is the most northerly point on mainland Britain.
UK, mainland Britain, So I've got some fantastic pictures there. So highly recommend that you do that. We did have time to do that on the way and still get to the ferry in time, ferry port at Gills Bay. Now, the ferry takes you over to mainland Orkney, which is the name of the main island on Orkney, over to a place called
St Margaret's Hope, which is at the northern part of South Rothsay.
So you disembark there. So you obviously drive your car into the ferry, leave the car, go and sit on on the deck. It's covered. It was really nice, and we had a bacon sandwich and some drinks and tea and stuff.
Luckily, it was very, very smooth crossing for me.
Yeah, because I know you were a bit worried.
I don't like that.
No, and then so then we literally got over to Orkney sort of late morning, and we were over there until the following afternoon, where we caught the ferry back over to mainland Scotland. So I would highly recommend it if you can, to fit in a couple of days in Orkney. You probably don't need more than a couple of days, but it was amazing, absolutely fantastic. So highlights on Orkney
are Scarborough.
Scarborough, absolutely.
The Maeshowe Chambered Cairn.
Yeah, Maeshowe.
Italian
Chapel is fantastic. The Ring of Brodgar, the Stones of Stenness. Honestly, this is a place where, you step back in time. And we're talking a long time.
And there's a rude word name of a little village, which I won't tell you. No. You can look that one up.
Yes, that's true. There's lots of hats and mugs you can get with that on there.
Yes.
So we couldn't find the sign for it. I wonder if that had been nicked. But anyway, so Orkney
was cold.
Orkney was freezing cold. Apparently it was one of the coldest they'd had for a long time. And we actually had to buy hats, and it was very, very cold. So again, you need to really prepare if you're planning to do a road trip in Scotland at that time of year.
We ate quite a bit of soup, didn't we, and cups of tea to keep warm.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So then after the next day, we caught the ferry back to Gills Bay, and then drove to John O'Groats, because you've got to have a picture at John O'Groats, because we were going to be at Land's End a few weeks after that, so we really wanted to have a picture at each end of the country. And then we drove back via John O'Groats back down to Inverness, which again was a nice drive. And we actually passed a castle on the way, and I can't remember the name of the castle now. Oh, it's a really famous one as well, and I can't think. I think it was shut by the time we got there, because we were late on in the day. It was shut, but so we continued on, and we did pass some Highland cows as well on that route down to Inverness, which was nice. So we stayed in Inverness for a couple of nights. There's a lot to do in Inverness, and again, a very famous place to stop off, very popular place to stop off. Culloden Battlefield. Go to Loch Ness, take a cruise. Castle Urquhart, absolutely fabulous place to visit. I'm trying to think. Clava Cairns, again, for stones. There's lots of stones in Scotland. I did keep touching them, but nothing happened. I didn't seem to go in the past and meet Jamie, for your Outlander fans. I did try numerous times, but nothing happened. But yes, so Clava Cairns, another great trip to take from Inverness. So the next day was our last day, and we drove down. So this is now day 18. Leave Inverness. Again, lots of lovely places to see in Inverness.
There was quite a bit of traffic congestion around there, as you remember, as well. So you've got to sort of plan your route out. And
Yeah. And we had we had a nice meal there as well. Oh, just when I think about meals, actually, I forgot to mention this on the Isle of Skye. One thing that's worth doing is popping into, I think it's a Morrison supermarket in Fort William, and just stocking up on drinks and snacks. Get yourself a cool bag, shove it in the car, because there's only the co-op on Skye in what's the capital? Portree. So you're better off kind of stocking up there. And also when you're doing that, the kind of North Coast 500, having plenty of kind of snacks and stuff to eat in your car as well, so that you're kind of prepared. Plenty of places to get petrol. We didn't really struggle with that. But on Skye, make sure that you book for meals, because we struggled with that.
We did. We ended up going to a fish and chip shop, I think.
In Portree, which was lovely.
And it wasn't a standard fish and chip shop, because you had to wait for different sittings.
It was very, very busy. That was May. It was incredibly busy, incredibly difficult to get in to eat anywhere. So you need to really book ahead if that's what you're going to do, unless you're going to take your own food or stay in an Airbnb. The name of the castle that we drove past on the way from John O'Groats was Dunrobin Castle, don't remember, but which was beautiful. But unfortunately, by the time we got, I think it was about 4:00, and I think it was closing at that point. So again, if you wanted to do that kind of coast route a bit more, probably maybe get the ferry over and stay in John O'Groats. Not a huge amount in John O'Groats, but you could do a bit more exploration at Dunnot's Head, that area, and then stay in John O'Groats, and then get up earlier the next day and do that kind of route back down to Inverness. You could add an extra day in. Like I say, this itinerary is really flexible with what you do. So then we arrived back in Edinburgh via, how did we drive that way back? I can't remember. Did we go through the Cairngorms?
We did. We touched through the Cairngorms National Park.
Yeah.
We allowed ourselves plenty of time again with an early start, didn't we? So
because we were catching a train down to York actually that day, so we needed to get back into Edinburgh for sort of 1 o'clock.
And we'll have plenty of time to get the car.
Yeah, so I think I'm just thinking about some of the tips that what would we do differently if we're going to do this. So this is just giving you some tips, those of you who are thinking about doing this trip this year. If you're going to do the North Coast 500, give yourself plenty of time. We did not have enough time. We really didn't. And I think we could have added another 3 days in.
I think that's always going to be the case, I think, because there's so much to see for everyone that you're always going to want more time. And because the weather is so unpredictable, even in May time.
Yeah, well, it was. I didn't expect it to be as cold as it was. So again, the weather is a big thing. So make sure you take layers. You've got a waterproof coat on. I had my waterproof jacket. Footwear, think about walking boots, things that are comfortable on your feet as well. Don't underestimate the cost either. I think because it's been a couple of years since we've been back to the UK, and we were a bit surprised just how expensive, like petrol was very expensive.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot going on in the world sort of thing, so the cost of petrol was on the increase. But when we knew the price of food had gone up, it was a bit of a shock to us exactly how much.
Yeah. And then I think, like I said, things like think about, putting yourself a cool bag in the car, filling it up, like Morrison's in Fort Williams, a good place to go. Get yourself some meal deals, sandwiches, crisps, drinks, whatever, so you've got those with you. Again, just being flexible. If the weather's not great, just trying to plan. Don't have such a strict itinerary that you can't, like, for example, the 3 days on Skye, we had to shift things around because the weather was not brilliant 2 of the 3 days. So we did things like the gardens, and obviously it's a lot outdoors, but we could do a bit more driving on some of the days where it wasn't so brilliant for walking. And then I think the other thing, one thing we also want to say, and I think I'm particularly bad at this, is I spend too much time looking through my phone or looking through my video device, is actually missing things because you're not taking in the scenery around you. And there are a couple of times where I was trying to find my phone when we had we literally drove around a corner and there was a
Applecross.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Applecross. It was when we were leaving the glamping pod when we're catching the.
Oh, that one.
Yeah. There was one at Applecross as well. So it was twice. There was twice where we had stags or deer in the middle of the road, and I was too busy faffing on trying to get my phone or trying to take a video that I actually missed them. So I think that's just keep your eyes open.
Yeah.
Enjoy the scenery. Take turns with driving so that you can both enjoy the scenery.
Most definitely.
Yeah, I think that's it. Is there anything else that you can suggest?
No, there's one thing I'm glad we did consider this, was make sure that where you're staying has parking, adequate parking. Because there's a couple of times, because it was a summer month, we were using the whole day, weren't we?
Yes, absolutely.
As much as we possibly could. And by the time we arrived at some accommodation, a lot of the parking spaces had disappeared and been used. So a couple of places, Canada comes to mind, is that we had to search around a bit for somewhere to park the car.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think if you're going in summer as well, do bear in mind, if you're not used to it, that it's light. Obviously, the further north that you go, the lighter it is. And it was. I don't know. Did we see any darkness when we were in Orkney?
Not total darkness. About 11 o'clock, you maybe needed your lights on your car.
Yeah, it was amazing. So that's basically a quick rundown of our itinerary, some quick tips, things that we're thinking about if you are planning your own Scottish road trip this year. Again, there's lots and lots of resources for this on our website. We have also got a Facebook group which you can join and ask questions, and we're available in that. Sometimes we go on there, do Facebook Lives, we do question and answer sessions. So there's loads and loads of information that you can ask from us, from other members of the group. So leave us some feedback if there's other things that you want to know. Otherwise, I think that's a fairly good rundown of the itinerary. Again, the itinerary and all this information will be on the show notes, as well as links to the actual full itinerary, which you can download, which has got recommendations as well, places to stay.
We could talk for hours on.
We could, absolutely. Trip, so. Absolutely. So we're planning to do similar, talk about our, we did a road trip around Cornwall as well. So we're coming on to a podcast later to talk about that. But in the meantime, really, I just want to say thanks for listening this week. We really appreciate everybody who downloads, who listens to the podcast. We're just so happy that so many people are enjoying it and we get some fantastic feedback. Until next week, from myself and Doug, we just want to say happy UK travel planning. Thank you.